Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of the Success Partner podcast. I have in the studio today some AI strategists and specialists that are going to give us some additional insights into AI in the legal space. So we have Bruce DiMedici and Kyle Harbaugh in the studio today, and of course myself. You know me, Daya Naef with the Success Partner. And we've just been having a very interesting conversation actually over the last couple of weeks. And we hopped in the studio today to share some really interesting coming trends with AI in our legal industry. So, Kyle, would you just kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi, everybody. My name's Kyle Harbaugh. I'm with Chief Go Officers. I've worked in law firms for over close to 15 years at this point. And what we were talking about that we said, man, this is something we should record. This is a really interesting conversation. Was this great sorting that we're seeing that we see the industry moving in some really interesting ways, some really interesting market pressures coming, and we really see law firms falling into two camps. That that one is this established traditional model, and one is an evolving, adapting model, and we think it's going to only get more stark the differences in those two camps.
Yeah, calling it the sort of the great sorting, the commoditization of law, efficiencies coming in, but still very much relying on that human judgment. Definitely not letting the AI getting out of hand and putting it in the driver's seat. Bruce, what are you seeing in your realm?
So, really congruent with what Kyle said, I see that lawyers are hesitant, they're trepidatious because they're getting caught up on hallucinations, on privacy issues. And my perspective on this is that you learn to use AI as a tool in the way that any other tool that has risks. In fact, Kyle and I were talking, I brought up that I think the two most dangerous tools I put in my hands were a table saw and a chainsaw, and I'm willing to use, although the chainsaw makes me nervous, I'm willing to use the chainsaw to go out and cut wood. My wife and I have an open fire pit to go cut wood, what is fallen in our yard. And, it's highly dangerous, but there are rules of safety, a tamer version, if you will, as I did drive back and forth to the coffee shop today. That's a pretty dangerous tool, but we make use of skills that we build and we pay attention to those rules, exercise caution. And really just picking up on Kyle's points that the law firms that hold back because of this, they're putting themselves in a position of losing competitive opportunities in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think this is market driven as well. Consumers are going to expect a lawyer to be able to use AI and deliver a faster response. And we see consumers already going to AI for legal help. Maybe, they can't the AI can't go to court yet, but they definitely can help, draft documents or point them in a certain direction. um, you know, Understanding that consumer behavior and positioning yourself well where you can still provide a lot of value very quickly and help your client see why they should still choose you over just some off the shelf tool that cuts them out of the picture completely is really important.
And just to pick up on your points, Kyle, there are two planks that I like to emphasize. The first is billing efficiency. If you're in-house counsel, there's some ethical issues here, but we'll set those aside for the moment. Best practice is you and I sit down over a frothy latte in your office, and we discuss how I can use AI to bring efficiencies and how we're going to have transparent billing on that. Because I'm entitled to retain a certain level of the revenue that status quo, I leverage those associates at 600 bucks an hour. I want that revenue. And you say, okay, there's a middle ground here. Let's be transparent on that. That's good business. That's good ethics. And the other is making use of strategic analysis, leveraging the power of LLMs to produce very high level strategy. That's another plank that I can sell to you as in-house counsel. And another corollary is the private equity market, of course, is catching up to this. There are recent reports where they are. This is so obvious, where they are advising and suggesting, recommending to private equity investors, look to your C suite, see if your C suite is making use of AI. But more importantly, if your C suite is an informed consumer of legal services in the context of what we're talking about, because I, the investor, my $5 million, I want, I want to see that money grow.
Go as far as possible. Absolutely. So, yeah, I'm definitely seeing with some of my clients, their clients are coming in collaboratively. They're like, "Hey, I did create this with ChatGPT, and I'm bringing, especially in transactions." I know we've seen some issues with people using it in defense cases, but in transactions, especially, they're coming back and it's thinking of things that their advisor really hasn't gotten to yet. I mean, they're going to cover everything, but they've been using it in a conversational model. And then the change in the industry has been coming for at least 2 generations, as far as lower level associates not being paid for by the consumer, by large consumer corporate clients have pushed back. They said, "We're not paying for first and second year associates. You're going to have to figure something else out." And I think now there's going to be the same thing. So there's going to be that push pull in the market where attorneys who are by our inherent, by our training and our experience, risk adverse, we're going to have to be confronted by our clients on the efficiencies that they're seeing.
I
So
was going
most
to say, yeah,
Go ahead.
Kyle may not want to pay me 6 hours for preparing that brief. He might raise the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, I also understand the value of expertise that is vetting the information produced. And so I'm perfectly happy paying for something along those lines where, somebody's checking its work. And I really see that is an aspect that professional services are going to move towards is a kind of a quality control, function where the information is being processed by AI, but at the last pass is human eyes still.
Yeah, human in the loop, and what you're to me what you're describing is what's called in AI the hybrid model, where natural intelligence, artificial intelligence are working together, and as you said, just putting different vocabulary, human in the loop. You say, Bruce, did you use AI at some level in the preparation of this brief? Yes, I did to this level, but here I did the final edits on it. And if you're astute, Kyle, you'll read it and you'll know if AI wrote that brief or if I did.
That's right.
It-
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so important to have good quality information going in and then verifying the output that it's accurate, that it didn't go off the rail someplace. And so really understanding what the tool needs and what the tool's going to do, and then having some sort of verification, quality control as the last pass is really the best practice, in my opinion.
Yeah, you have to have it written in your processes and teach your employees and your team on how the system actually works. I just got back from ABA Tech Show, and there was a great prompting masterclass. And I think that many lawyers still don't understand a lot of the basic concepts. I mean, of course, we were there, so we were using it as a level up because we're the 2,500 that have already been in the trenches, but even then, learning how to develop a skill. But most attorneys now, they think, just you say AI and they just go, "Oh, ChatGPT, whatever. My kids use that," or "I made a recipe or a birthday card or something with that." Why is there still such a resistance, do you think?
I mean, I'd say you don't know what you don't know, and I get that. I had a recent client with or a recent talk with a client, and they go, "Yeah, I'm kind of playing around with AI. I use it for, like you said, putting together a birthday card or whatever. I'm using it for these little tasks, but I know I haven't really scratched the surface. That there's all this other stuff out there that not quite sure how to use it or what the best use is or what's a good tool. And they've used like this off the shelf thing, whether that's chat. I saw a poll that most people are still using chat GPT, although I would say right now Claude is the top dog, subject to change. I mean, there's so many tools and it's changing so often, and there's new capabilities coming out all the time. Really, it takes a lot for somebody like me who's, my company's built two tools from the ground up to stay on top of all this. And we're shifting, pretty frequently, trying new things out. So there's a lot going on in the space, and you need to really stay up on it. It's really a full-time job just to keep up on it all.
Kyle, I want to enrich the point you made. I took 4 AI classes a couple years ago and just found myself enjoying this, swimming in this. And to your point, every day I feel like I learn something new. Every day I'm looking for new papers to download from archive. And full disclosure, I skipped the math, but to go through the methodology and the conclusions. The real nut of this to me is if you and I were running a firm and somebody said, I want to be in the AI department, setting aside the credentials, we'd say, this is really a full-time commitment. You don't do this as one of 3 practice areas, and you need to be committed to the notion that it is a daily learning process. Nobody's going to quite do that 7 days a week, but that's the way to look at this, because some new learning technique, some new prompting technique, and this translates to how you use the tool.
Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think Bruce, that might be part of our barrier to it. We're as lawyers, we're used to being the smartest person in the room, and now we have to start over.
Yes, I'm sure. I think this is resonant with the both of you. I was explaining to somebody today, a friend, that I really have to think in 2 different camps. When I'm talking to lawyers, there's sort of a particular manner of thinking. When I talk with AI engineers, it's really a much different way of thinking, and it's an easy transition, but there is a transition between the 2.
Hmm. Yeah, there was a great parallel that we actually our keynote put about how there's so many similarities between law and development. All the rules, the constrictions, the logic, the if then, if this then that. But then there's the major differences, the empathy, the human experience, the consequences. A compute code can just be rewritten. Oh, there's some bugs in the code. Let's just rewrite it. In law, somebody's gone to jail or someone's lost their life work. So there's no takesy backsies.
Well,
Yeah.
and Kyle, go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that really reminds me of a point of when I was working in a law firm, and we're working with all these, business retail customers and or clients, and they're just screwing up massively. And one day, the attorney I'm working with, they go, "Yeah, the problem is these people don't think like lawyers. They think they're thinking, they're just trying to like serve the customer and get things done, and they don't have their risk hat on. They're not seeing like what would be smart, what are the ramifications of us doing it this way or not doing anything at all. And so there's all sorts of issues that come from not thinking like a lawyer and not being able to see those risks because you're not in court, you're not seeing how these things play out. On the other hand, there's all sorts of risks. The risk aversion that lawyers can have can go too far where you're not moving fast enough and you're not taking calculated risks. And that can be a giant risk in and of itself.
Kyle, you and I started talking about a conversation recently had. And as I promised you, I promised not to tell a lot of anecdotes, but I think this one fits in. And Daya, I was having a conversation with the CEO of a consulting firm, and I want to emphasize that the founder of this person is cognitively gifted. He explained to me that he found a flaw in the formula of pi.
Oof.
Okay. And the CEO was explaining to me, with the founder part of the conversation, CEO was explaining to me that they are now building AI agents. And this, that's a cue, agents for what I call clients who are neophytes to AI. I said, oh, here's my background in AI governance. Here's the importance of AI governance, just what Kyle was talking about. I elaborated a bit. And I kid you not, he smirked a bit and explained to me that they have brought in a change management consultant, which is like, I understand that. And really, to paraphrase that, was comprehensively the only package that they needed to deliver, along with the AI agents. And, and I the conversation wasn't really going anywhere after that. But this correlates to Kyle's point that it's AI governance that is actually operable, that is actually implemented, whether it's now or later. I think it's appropriate for us to get into the status of insurance coverage over use of AI.
Absolutely. I was just going to get to that. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. It's one thing I'm noticing, I'm seeing as risk adverse as attorneys are, I invariably pull cybersecurity insurance, cybersecurity checklists. What are you guys doing about that? And it's crickets. So go into that a little bit, Bruce, as to why they're not covering that, or what should we be looking at?
So carriers have actually filed with regulators seeking to withdraw from covering AI claims. And I like to answer this question rhetorically. What is an AI claim? An AI claim is a claim they don't want to pay. And so they're looking now for reasons to limit or exclude coverage so that if they're, for example, they're going to look either for the law firms or for the clients. And if they're looking at the clients are going to ask if the law firm properly prepared them for this. But the carriers will look to see, is there an AI governance policy? And to be blunt, is this copy and paste from those well written, excellent graphics that KPMG and Boston Consulting post online? The graphics are excellent and there's much information there. But if it's just a copy and paste from that and there is an implementation that matches the policy, that's what I like to call an easy swing for carriers. And so this is a trick risk point both for the clients when they're using AI, but germane to our conversation, if the lawyers are advising on the use of AI and they're not covering this point, and I get to one more point in a moment. If they're not covering that point, then there's an issue about the lawyers setting themselves up for liability. And what I am seeing becoming commonplace in the legal market, I think is a high risk endeavor. Lawyers that I know enough about their background to know what's going on. A group of them got together. The law firm is now presenting on their website that they do AI law, that they practice AI law. I look at their credentials, and Kyle knows right where I'm heading. Typically, those lawyers have a legacy of doing insurance and privacy litigation and no training in AI. And, where that's going to come to haunt the law firm sometimes is something goes wrong with the client's use of AI. There's an adverse claim. They look to the attorney and they say, we paid you a lot of money. You presented yourself specifically as an expert. I think maybe you fell short because you didn't explain about the IP risk, the algorithmic discrimination risk. We could go on and on. You didn't instruct us to what to look for in our vendor contracts to make sure that there's third-party coverage covering us. This is not a happy risk to discuss, but it's a very real part of the landscape.
Yeah. Absolutely. And those terms of services, we're talking about that. Your terms of services for vendors, they just change. It's a unilateral contract. They just up and change and say, okay, now we are going to do this. And somebody has to be monitoring that. And I'd say it's probably not too conservative to say your AI policy needs to be revisited at least quarterly. It's not something you do once and put on a shelf because things are changing so quickly.
Yeah, and I really shudder at the idea that well, AI is just not safe. It's too many lawyers got into trouble. Our policy is not to have a policy. Don't use it. That doesn't work. Your employees are going to use it, and so put guardrails up and say this is how we use it. This is how we don't use it. These are the tools we use. If it's not an approved tool, we don't use it. Or um, you know maybe the liability is on you, something like that. Uh, and think through what these tools are capable of. If there is security things that are, GDPR, SOC 2 compliant, HIPAA compliant, things of that nature, well, then those are good to use. If they're not, then we shouldn't be using them. We need to come up with some other kind of solution. And so, we got to think about how to protect the client's data, all that sensitive information that you have in your firm, and how to handle it appropriately, start to finish.
And, Kyle, to add to what you said, part of this is understanding the terms of agreement between the user and the LLM. Now, Claude, every law firm makes its own decision. Claude claims that all the inputs and outputs are properly encrypted. They specify the encryption. They claim that it's arguably work product. Whether a law firm wants to accept that or take a different point of view, but it still should be part of the calculus to be informed. But also, and I was waiting for you to feel free to weigh in on this, that the model that a lot of firms may want to look at are private language models
Yes,
that are small
absolutely.
scale. So go ahead, talk about that if you have experience on that.
Yeah. So that's what we believe is the gold standard, at least at this point, when we're talking, beginning of April 2024 or 2026. Gosh, so it's having something that's closed, something that's not trained on the entire internet, but trained on some very specific vetted information that does a very specific thing, but it's the thing you need it to do. That is the best because it's much more likely to give the proper output. It's not pulling from vast amount of data that could have been corrupted or is being updated. I mean, I think that's one of the most challenging things is these models are constantly being updated. And so you might find something that works really well for a while and then it doesn't work so well later on down the road.
Sure. Let's talk about data injection to enrich the point you made. Just to quickly dive into this, your vendor for your AI is holding data within their fortress, and if the baddies can penetrate that fortress, access that data, they can reprogram the data to create errors or to misperform, so that HAL doesn't open the door. And so by having a private LLM, the law firm is able to exercise more optimal control itself over the data and ideally reduce the likelihood of a data injection attack.
Yeah, exactly. And that's we've built those systems and that's what we recommend. If the price point makes sense, it's not for everybody, but having a standalone system that is internal, that is trained on your documents, maybe somebody's really outstanding at drafting, NDAs. Well, then train the system on, how to draft a really solid NDA. And then that way where that training came from, and it's not being influenced by outside forces.
Yeah. And as you said, you and your vendor for that product, meaning you, Kyle, maybe you work out that you say, Kyle, I want you to continuously dynamically improve this model. There's a price tag to it, but to me that's part of, I'm a competitive law firm, I want to maintain a competitive spot in the market, so I'm writing you a check.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but you get the work done faster, more efficiently, and everybody is happier. I mean, part of this is keeping it's a talent retention issue.
Yeah,
I mean,
that too.
the best people, the A players, they're going to be at a firm that is pushing the envelope, that is innovating, that's doing things better than we did it last year. And so really getting on top of this is a way to keep your best people engaged.
Yeah.
And sure, I've been a party to some of those conversations with the equity committee of the law firm. And to your point, if they're not moving on this, and you're a 38-year-old ambitious attorney, you say to yourself, okay, is this where I want to plant my stake for the next 20 years?
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Or is it
makes
time to
sense.
talk to my recruiter? And
Yeah.
maybe they know somebody who is more innovative and you can learn this new area and where the market seems to be moving.
Yeah. I want to jump in a little bit about something that's very passionate to me is capturing some of the institutional wisdom of these founders that are
Uh-huh.
retiring and turning over their firms. I think this is a wonderful use of an AI product, especially a closed system like that, to
Yes.
come in and I'm helping people transfer that and coming in and interviewing people in person and on Zoom and whatnot to start developing that, both for people who are not retiring and just want to train their juniors on their own sort of model, their own secret sauce of
Yeah,
practice.
absolutely.
as well as those who are going to turn over the firm, but they want that legacy to also go into the next generation. I think we're going to wrap up for today, and we have a lot more to talk about. We're going to have to schedule another time. So thank you so much, Kyle and Bruce, for being on this very special episode and edition of The Success Partner. And again, everybody listening, I'm Daya Naef. I run The Success Partner. So please stay tuned. We will be meeting again and continuing with this topic.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.